Did Trump administration cuts to the National Weather Service impact preparations and response to the tragic flooding last weekend in central Texas? Democratic politicians are demanding an investigation. The Trump administration says agency officials did their jobs, providing early and consistent warnings. Joining us to discuss, Jesse Burns, senior editor here at The Hill. Hey, Jesse, so the National Weather Service has lost 15% of its workforce since Trump came back into office, about 600 employees. Do you think that opens Trump up to fair criticism when something like this happens?
Well, it definitely puts the administration on its back foot to try to respond to the catastrophic loss of life that we've seen in Central Texas. And really, this is putting scrutiny not just on the Trump administration, but also state and local officials as well. And we've seen for several days now the Department of Homeland Security, the White House, really pushing back on that criticism, putting out timelines of when the alerts were issued, the White House itself pushing back on criticism, saying that Trump cannot be blamed for a once-in-a-century natural disaster. But it does put a lot of scrutiny and raises questions about the impact of the cuts at these federal agencies, at the Weather Service, at NOAA, at other federal agencies that respond to natural disasters, as well as tries to alert individuals ahead of time to get to safety. And I think a lot of those questions are going to remain open for quite some time as the state continues to grapple with the fallout from more than 100 people losing their lives over this huge tragedy.
For me, one of the biggest questions hanging out there involves this warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service. He worked at the Austin San Antonio office and was with the Weather Service for 32 years. His name is Paul Ura. At the end of April, he reluctantly took an early retirement package offered by the Trump administration as part of its efforts to reduce the federal workforce. Here's what KXAN, our local affiliate in Austin, wrote about him at the time. They said he gained tremendous experience understanding local weather patterns while ensuring timely warnings get disseminated to the public in a multitude of ways. Fast forward 2 months, there's a flood happening in the middle of the night in a place where cell service is spotty. There are no sirens. It seems like that type of expertise could have come in handy.
Well, there definitely is. We've heard the stories, not just with this tragedy, but with other major issues of national and international importance, where we have examples of this brain drain happening that many observers have warned about, not just in the Weather Service, but in healthcare, in other areas of the federal government, where you have career federal servants who have spent decades honing their skills and becoming experts, subject matter experts on many of these very thorny and technical topics. And to have those individuals leaving the federal government certainly does create a bit of a vacuum. Of course, the federal government, instead, the White House maintaining that the cuts had nothing to do with the alerts being disseminated in a timely fashion. But it also raises more focus on what experts call the last mile in trying to, for these weather alerts, it doesn't matter if the federal government, if the state is putting out alerts, you still have to have people on the ground actually hear and understand the alerts. And so when something like this is happening overnight, having alarms along the riverbank to notify those within earshot that a major event is happening can really make the difference, a lot of experts say, to try to get people to safety.
Yeah, and one of the issues that I read today was that the kids at the Mystic Summer Camp were actually told not to have their screens and their cell phones, which is understandable for parents wanting their kids to get out and enjoy summer. But then, could that have prevented them from getting those late night alerts that there was a dangerous flood coming is a question that is still, very important to understand as this investigation goes on. But, while it's probably too early to fully understand whether the cuts that Trump implemented contributed to the loss of life in Texas, experts are warning that there are more threats on the horizon. Hurricane season is picking up. The National Weather Service is stretched thin. There have also been substantial cuts at FEMA. It seems like the Trump administration has a lot riding on the performance of federal emergency response this summer.
Absolutely does. And there's also, you mentioned FEMA, the elephant in the room when it comes to these natural disasters occurring is that, these local officials are really hard pressed. We've seen it for several days now, hard pressed to come up with answers to key questions. And they are in a position where there's an enormous spotlight on the events as they unfolded and the response at a local level. And what we've seen with the Trump administration, at least in the first 6 months, is really trying to rein in the amount of effort that the federal government spends, the amount of money that is spending on the federal level, and trying to instead put the emphasis on states and trying to push more funding to individual states to have them be at the front lines of responding to natural disasters. And so there are a lot of questions around how is that implemented. Are the emergency response coordinators in each of these states and each of these communities in a position where they have the high standards that you would expect maybe someone running a field office for FEMA or running an emergency, a federal emergency response unit? Those are the kind of questions that I think we're starting to see different communities grapple with. And what role does the federal government play in having to respond to these natural disasters where clearly they're touching individuals beyond communities, beyond counties, but an entire state and really an entire nation?
Yeah, big questions about why there weren't emergency sirens that were available for people to hear when that disaster was happening. Some local officials seem to be suggesting that it was a money issue, that they didn't want to pay for those systems to be implemented. I know the Trump administration doesn't want to talk about this, but another component of this discussion is climate change. There is scientific consensus that climate change is making extreme weather more common. Now, you can't pinpoint any one individual disaster, but this was a key concern across the federal government until Trump came back into office and said this is not something we're going to focus on.
Well, there's no question that the Trump administration had a marked contrast from the Biden administration, as well as the first Trump administration from President Obama's tenure. When the Trump administration has come into power, for both of these terms, there has been a marked contrast from the federal position on climate change, as well as the priorities for investing in efforts to combat climate change, both on a research area, but also in terms of regulation. Now, a lot of Trump supporters, they have cheered his efforts to roll back a lot of the regulations that they view as really hindering business, that many Democrats say are key to ensuring that the federal government does try to rein in climate change to the degree that is able to. But certainly it does put a focus on Trump's priorities when it comes to this. And you're seeing, anytime you have video where within a matter of minutes a riverbank is rising many, many feet, that does, call into question the broader priorities. And so you are going to see many Democrats who are saying, look, this is what we've been warning for. We understand extreme weather events are only going to increase, and should there be a greater focus on trying to combat that, not only as a country but also globally. Trump also, moving away from a lot of the previous priorities in terms of the Paris Climate Accords and other environmental efforts worldwide. And so certainly Democrats are seething at the moment because they view this as the latest instance of the risks that come from not focusing on climate change.
Do you think Democrats run the risk here of people feeling like they're politicizing a tragedy? Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, is demanding the Commerce Secretary launch an investigation, even as there are still people missing.
Well, there definitely is going to have to be this period of, obviously respecting the families, the lives that have been touched through this major tragedy. At the same time, the Trump administration also wants answers. They want to know how this was able to occur and where there was a breakdown. The federal government is very much defending its steps, defending the timeline in terms of putting out the alerts. But you're also seeing people at the local level trying to defend their own efforts leading up to this event. And so you are going to see a push for answers, not just from the press, but also within the government. But you're also going to see some politicization, sadly, of it. And when that happens, both parties do risk that, do risk overstepping. But I think you see deep concerns among both parties and a deep desire for answers in terms of how this occurred and ways that this can be prevented in the future. Members of the Democratic as well as Republican Party both acknowledge that the parties are going to, everyone across the government is going to have to really focus on this and see where the breakdown was and try to to prevent this from happening again.
Yeah, tragedy we will continue to follow, from the search for victims and cleanup to answers about why this happened, and could steps been taken to lessen the loss of life. Jesse Burns, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Drew.